Hi, everybody. My name is David Chow. I'm the Chief Technology Strategy Officer at Trend Micro. Before coming over to Trend Micro, I started back in January this year. But before coming to Trend Micro, I was actually I spent 20 years in the federal government, former federal employee. My last role was actually the CIO at the Department of Housing and Urban Development back in 2018 to 2020. I can honestly say that I've been with both sides, practitioner versus, obviously product provider, solution provider. I love every minute of what I do right now because it's very challenging. It's a different type of challenging. There's bureaucracy, but it's very interesting in terms of just different type of relationship that you're looking to build on a daily basis. So today I'm here to build a relationship with you all. I'll be at the booth. So if you have any questions, you want to know about my experience switching over to the dark side, or you just want to have a conversation or talk about our products, I'm your guy. I'll be at the booth and to talk to you. So today I want to talk to you about, at the very high level, one of our product it's called Vision One, Trend Micro Vision One. And that capability is something that we're overlaying on top of, we're using a cloud platform for security XDR and overlaying on top of the legacy environment and very fitting for US government. And be able to get the necessary data, feeding the data into our Vision One and be able to complete any policy changes or any security or defend against any security threats. So obviously I'm not the brain here. The brain is actually our Chief Technology Officer for Federal, Dave Abramowitz. So Dave is going to walk you through all the details, and then we're going to take some Q&A if we have time at the end. All right, so thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Dave. Simple green button, red button, I like it. Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry we're getting a little bit of a late start. I was actually out getting a drink of water and the toilet seat hit me in the back of the head, so forgive me. Good crowd. So yeah, I'll be referencing the platform that David spoke about, Vision One, but first a little bit of customer case study. So in this scenario, which is a scenario that a lot of our customers, government agencies are in right now, which is they're not quite ready to make the jump to the cloud completely, or they're taking little pieces and moving them to the cloud. But there is a lot of on-prem still, and so one of our advantages is that we can operate in that hybrid type of environment. If a customer is still on-premise, we can provide the solutions for them. If they're moving to the cloud, we can provide a hybrid of solutions, and if they're all the way there, then we go with the hosted solutions. In this case, this particular customer had over 50,000 endpoints, over 10,000 servers, and they were very particular about their NSX environment and being able to get into visualization into the VDI, the virtual desktops, and get threat information from them, and they weren't getting anywhere at the time. So what they asked from us, number one, advanced threat inspection. So from our perspective, that means we're not collecting data just from the desktops and laptops. Because if we try to tell that story, it's a very short story. You had an event at your desktop or your laptop, it was cleaned, end of story. But we need more than that to tell a more complete story. And that's going to involve other components that I'll get into. So first they wanted that threat inspection into the virtual environment. So from a network perspective, being able to see all of that network traffic headed for the virtual environment. Number two, which is a big ask from all of our customers, is I don't want to go into 5, 10, 15 different consoles to get the information I need. I can take my threat report from one, and then I have to go look at the other one and put that all together myself. So don't send me on a wild goose chase to a bunch of different consoles. Send me to one, where I can get all of my threat intelligence, where I can find out who's the sniper, what are they after, what's been happening in the environment, where is it coming from, and where is it going now? What are we still seeing? Am I okay, or is there still something going on that I need to address? So having that centralized visibility, also policy management, again, not having to go to multiple consoles to configure policies, and investigation. And number three, role-based administration. So we want to be able to configure users based on their roles to have particular access in the console and to be able to perform particular functions. So to do that for an on-premise customer, we divide our solution into a few different areas, which happen to be the 3 areas that Trend Micro focuses. Number 1, the endpoint security, so taking care of the desktops, laptops, mobile devices. Number 2, the data center. In this case, we're focusing on the left side for the physical, because they had their physical environment in VDI, eventually moving them into the cloud environment to bring in AWS and other cloud platforms as needed. But for the first iteration, just focusing on the physical on-prem. And the last piece, but probably the most important piece, was the network security, where we're standing up breach detection appliances. DDI stands for Deep Discovery Inspector, and custom sandboxing. So to throw a URL or a file that is suspicious, but we don't really know the final decision on it, we'll blow it up in a virtual environment, record everything it does, and then make a final decision. And being able to see that DDI box that can also see all of the network traffic to determine and correlate what's going on with the rest of what we're seeing at the endpoint and data center into that central visibility console. So that single collection point where we can get the network traffic, the endpoint traffic, and the data center traffic all into one and be able to correlate and tell a more complete story. And in fact, the only real missing piece from here would be email. So if the customer were running Office 365, for example, we can pull that data in as well and correlate everything we're seeing. So now the story gets a little different, right? It's not just you have a threat at the desktop, it's been resolved, let's move on. It's you have a threat at the desktop and it's been resolved here, but in fact it started as a phishing attack. Here's the email. It's sitting in 25 other users' mailboxes. Do you want to delete it or quarantine it right now? And by the way, we're seeing this on the network. There's some lateral movement. We need to shut that down, and here's how we remediate that. So it's being able to tell that complete story. But for part 1, this is where we wound up with the on-premise. So the evolution of this going forward, especially from customers who are already in this environment, is they're asking us, okay, so now we've got sensors on the endpoint, we've got sensors in our data center, we've got sensors in the network. How can we play to a zero trust architecture? And that's really the next phase of where we're taking our customers now. And so just a little baseline, if you will. So zero trust, all about securing users' access to data, right? No rocket science there. They're using endpoints, they're using devices over a network to get at applications, whether they're on-premise or they're in the cloud. And enterprise security systems have sensors at most or all of these, in our case all of those places, to determine any malicious activity that might be going on. And with the addition of protection elements, so very particular to the arena that they're in. So endpoint protection, including DLP and device control, application control, all that sort of thing. So we have the sensors and we have the protection elements. And so why do we need something new? And what's all the hubbub about zero trust is in fact that these protection elements and sensors don't communicate with each other often. So something's happening on a desktop, or something happens in email, or something happens on the network, but those sensor points don't traditionally communicate with each other. So our implementation in the zero trust architecture says, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take those sensors that we have everywhere, network, email, cloud, server, endpoint, and we're going to feed them into a system that does visibility and analytics. This is the Vision One platform that David was referring to, and I'll show you some of that in a sec. So that's the visibility and analytics platform, which then in turn feeds automation and orchestration so that we can take action, whether it's isolating an endpoint or remoting into that endpoint or opening up a shell. So we're taking that automation and orchestration through those protection elements. Now what zero trust also brings is we calculate a risk score. And that risk score is based on the user, and it's also based on the device. So if a user logs in most of the time from Washington, D.C., and suddenly on the geo map we see that the user's logging in a foreign country, that could that could set a flag, set an alert of some sort. Is there anything else going on? So that sort of thing for a user health. Is their machine being targeted with a phishing attack? Are they currently undergoing some sort of threat? And the device itself, to set a profile for that device. So what do I consider a healthy device? Well, if it's Windows, it has to be running the minimum of this version. The firewall has to be turned on. There has to be AV on it. There has to be EDR on it. All of these things I would consider a healthy device. And so when you take those two things into account, as well as the application, whether it's private or in the cloud that the user's trying to access, and calculating a risk score for all three of those pieces. The user's device could have a bunch of vulnerabilities on it that are unpatched. That's going to kick up the score. If the user's logged in under an administrator account, which is not normal, and it's from another country, that's going to kick up the score. So that risk score is calculated, which can then feed into the automation and orchestration piece to take actions at those endpoint protection elements. So what that means is if my risk score is, let's say, 20, and I have a rule that says anything over 30 and I'm no longer able to access certain resources, and I'm doing something that increases my risk, that rule will fire off, and I'll show you that in a second. So the advantage that we have at Trend Micro is we're able to tell that complete story from the user to the data, and we also have the analytics and the threat intelligence and everything else that's necessary for a SOC analyst to tell the complete story of what's going on in the environment, not just localized at a desktop for EDR, but XDR sensors at all of those places to tell the complete story. So this, I'm sure you've seen this many times, the Zero Trust core pillars. There's not one vendor that can access all of this, right? Otherwise, there wouldn't be a lot of companies presenting today, right? So it's important to know where we play. Now, before I show you this next slide, I will tell you that Trend Micro's color is red. That's our company color. So in this next slide, red is good. Red is not bad. So these are all the places in red that Trend Micro plays. And our focus with Zero Trust, and particularly with Vision One, is at the far right with visibility and analytics and automation and orchestration that I was just showing. So to do this, and by the way, we're also working with a lot of third-party providers that maybe are in the blue sections to be able to bring more of that functionality in. I've been at Trend Micro for over 20 years, and back when I started, there was no such thing as an email with an infected attachment, and it was very insular, right? We developed everything at Trend Micro. It had to be ours. We're not going to share anything. Heck with our competition, and all of that sort of thing. But over time, customers started telling us a much different story, especially when they're running other vendor products, which is normally the case, right? If we could get Trend from soup to nuts in an agency organization, fantastic, but that's not realistic. And so our job isn't to come in and say, you have to be running everything Trend in order to get the advantage, let's say, of this Vision One platform. You actually don't, because we can deploy XDR sensors at the endpoints, whether they're running Trend Micro or not. And so we also are making a very big effort to not only incorporate third party, which I'll show you, but ingesting threat intelligence from other sources and sending it out as well. So if another vendor product has an API that we can talk to and share a new bad file or a new URL, we'll send that out. And so what we do inside our approach to Zero Trust in the Vision One platform is we're taking a look at the devices, and whether they're managed, unmanaged, in remote locations, office locations. The same agent provides EPP, XDR, we call extended detection and response because we're looking at all the different areas, risk visibility, secure web gateway, Zero Trust network access. All of that is a single agent. And so what we're looking at when we're looking at that device is two areas. Number one, is the user, device, and application healthy? So our Zero Trust Risk Insights application within Vision One continuously is monitoring the risk score of an identity, of a device, of apps, of data, so that analysts can make a decision, administrators can make a decision, how do I configure my policy for best results? And the second piece of that is how do I hold a secure connection? So when the user tries to connect to a private application or a public cloud application, I'm going to establish that secure connection and I'm going to apply my rules. So let's take a look at the Vision One platform. Screenshots, because I couldn't do a live demo for you, but I'll give you a QR code at the end where you can see a much more laid out demo that I did recently for ATAR. So this is the executive dashboard screen within Vision One, because the CISO will want to come in here and say, what is my risk, right? The problem is not technology anymore. The problem is risk that we have to address. And so I come in here and I want to know, what is my risk? How do I compare maybe to other companies or agencies my size, others in the region, an industry, and in my industry, how do I compare? But what's that score made out of? And it comes to us in the next slide. This one is the other thing that we're getting asked by the CISO is, okay, I've got my risk score. What's my attack surface? Because it's increasing and it's all over the place, and my users are using all kinds of different devices, and they're in all different kinds of locations, and I've got this network, I've got a virtual network. What is my attack surface? So by having those network sensors, the XDR sensors, we're able to collect information about all of the devices. So maybe there are some rogue servers or some machines that don't have any protection on them that I need to address. So I want to know in my environment what is my attack surface, not only for my devices, but for my internet-facing assets. And you see some of these things are labeled coming soon as well, because there are constantly more developments coming into Vision One. So I have my attack surface, I have my dashboard with my score. What's my score made up of? Because we have the sensors at the endpoint, email, server, cloud instance, virtual device, network, we can gather all those together and bundle them into creating this risk score. So we look at 6 different categories, the first being account compromise. Is an account being targeted? Am I under a threat on my account? Vulnerability detection. So this is huge. If you're familiar with ZDI, the Zero-Day Initiative, that came to us via acquisition of HP, Tipping Point. So Tipping Point came with us, and as did the Zero-Day Initiative. They're the ones who run the Pwn2Own competitions, which I hope you have seen the news from the one that just concluded in Vancouver. All right, we actually wheel out a Tesla and challenge the vulnerability researchers to break into the infotainment system. One of them this time, there was one group that caused the wipers to go and the lights to blink and the trunk to open, and they wanted a bundle of money. No one walked away with a car this time. But that is our threat research arm. They are the largest vendor-agnostic bug bounty program in the world. Over 60% of vulnerabilities that get reported in a given year come from ZDI, and then everyone else is after that. So that's the backbone behind the vulnerability detection and filtering that happens, so that we can say if you're running a Trend Micro endpoint or you're running Trend Micro on your cloud instance and you've got our vulnerability shielding in place, we'll protect you while you have a chance to patch. But if you don't, then we can figure out, okay, these are the vulnerabilities that exist on that system. They're going to kick up the risk score also if they're not patched. And we're using other vendor, we're using the data from other vendors in there. Rapid7, for instance, Qualys. So people that are doing vulnerability scans, we can ingest that data into Vision One to make more intelligent decisions and to help policy creation. Anomaly detection, no matter where it's happening throughout the network. Cloud app activity, XDR detection that we're getting from all those sensors all around. And threat detection. So all of those things together combine to give a risk score. So how do you use the second part? So that's the risk insights. The second part that I had in the diagram was the secure access rules, the zero trust secure access rules. So these are the rules that are going to be put in place to help determine should a user have access to the data or to the private app or to the cloud app that they're trying to get access to. And I'll show an example of this in a moment. And to use those rules, you can create the posture of the machines. Remember, I was speaking before about what is it that determines a healthy Windows machine, for instance. So we have Mac OS in here also, and we're also looking at Linux for vulnerabilities and threats. But this is where you define what the posture is for a healthy device. And then you can use those in the secure access rules. So here's an example. And hopefully this will play. Yay, okay. So we're going into the secure access rules that you just saw. This is a rule that deals with users with a persistent high risk score. So we're going to define what that is. First, we're going to turn it on and say that it applies to all users, but because we also ingest AD and Okta, we can get specific. When does it apply? What's the score? In this case, we're looking at between 50 and 100. We're going to monitor the sign-in attempt, and we're going to disable the user account if they exceed that threshold. There's some other actions we can do. And we're also going to block their internal app access if they hit that threshold. And once they get back underneath that threshold, we'll revoke those actions and put everything back to normal. So once we've got this rule in place, it gets deployed to all the endpoints. And so now we're going to see an example of someone at an endpoint just bringing up a browser, going to Office 365, and an internal wiki, which is grayed out because it was our actual wiki. And so everything's fine. They have access. All is well. Now, what happens in this case if this user brings up a command prompt, runs it as administrator, and performs an action that increases their risk score? In this case, they're going to dump LSAS, which is indicative of trying to get credential access, heighten their capabilities to do other bad things. So you'll see that is considered a bad thing. Zero Trust Secure Access will fire up and say, okay, now you're blocked from your internal apps because you've exceeded the threshold. And so if they try to refresh the screen, they'll see they can no longer get to the wiki. And because we configured in that Zero Trust Secure Access rule to boot their account out, they're logged off of Office 365 and they can't get back on. So this is the advantage of having that risk access and evaluation going on all the time. And so if they get cute in this case and they try to run a PowerShell to get at the wiki, sorry, no dice. The wiki is still blocked because the account is still in high risk status. And so that's an example of what happens when you create a Zero Trust Secure Access rule and a user violates that rule. Now, another thing we can do when you're setting up the private access to either internal or cloud apps is we are allowing the customers to set up a connector, which is basically a virtual appliance, to proxy that traffic. And the example here, of course, since we're here today, is using the AWS platform to set up that image. So this whole system is continuously monitoring the risk status of a user, of a device, of the app they're going to, maybe the cloud app itself, because we know through web reputation and those kinds of things that it's currently serving up malware or it's spitting out a bad advertisement with some embedded code, so that will contribute to the health of the cloud app, for instance. So beyond all that, right, using our third-party connections, really, really important. I thought I had a screenshot of that, maybe not, but we have a really long list of third-party products and vendors that we're working with, especially in those environments in the Zero Trust core pillars that we're not addressing as trend, but bringing in that technology through third-party connections. Shared threat intelligence is a big thing because our job is not to come in and bully you and say you've got to have trend soup to nuts. Not realistic. Our job is to come in and bolster your security posture, to give you a better return on investment on the other vendor solutions that you have in the environment by sharing out our threat intelligence wherever we can. and the ability to overlay, as David pointed out, the Vision One platform on a legacy on-premises environment, still getting that sensor data from the different environments to feed up so that we can correlate whether you're entirely on-premise, whether you're a hybrid of on-premise and cloud, or totally on the cloud. This, if you point your phone there, is going to point you to a YouTube video. I know we had a very short time here, didn't get into a large demo of Vision One, but you'll see that's about an hour and change of a full demo I did to demonstrate the capabilities of Vision One to give you that security abstraction layer to use for threat analysis. And so, woo, look at that, the timer just hit 0. Want to thank you on behalf of David and myself, and I guess we'll take any questions with the remaining time that we have, which is 0. Any questions? Yes, sir.
When you block the internal apps when they reach out the score, can you also allow, when you block those internal apps when they reach that risk score, can you also allow specific apps like a help desk portal?
Yes, excellent question. So I wasn't able to show all the screens. I think you'll see it in the longer demo. But you can define all of the internal apps that are being used and define which users have access to those under normal conditions. So for instance, if you're using Salesforce, something like that, or a help desk app, those are allowed for all users. And then maybe there's some specific condition where that would be revoked if their machine is risky. But yeah, there's a whole section in Vision One where you can define all your internal applications.
So as a follow-up to that, so once a user is blocked, can you set the rules by which a user can take certain actions to reduce their risk score and get below that threshold again? And is there also the capability to kind of push messages? Maybe you want to interoperate with your training to recommend that the user take another training around certain, healthy actions online. So can you just talk a little bit about how the user then either independently or through verification can get that risk score back down?
Sure. So that's going to be predominantly in the hands of the analyst or administrator, because typically the reason why that risk score is happening is because there is some threat in the environment or some risky activity, which then will be able to figure out what's going on, and the remediation steps are typically in the hands of that administrator. Like something has to be turned on, or a threat has to be eradicated in some fashion, and that will bring the risk score back. We typically don't put anything in front of the users other than that box that you saw for the secure access violation. Usually that's all done in the hands of the admin. Your second part of your question was? Oh, the education piece. Yeah, so the education piece, again, that's not in Vision One per se, but we do have them tied into, we have a whole campaign called Phish Insight, right? If you go to phishinsight.trendmicro.com. So if it's a phishing incident, we can kick off a training module in there for the users, or the customer can. They can kick off a training module for the users that are have been phished, for instance. Thank you. All good. All right, thanks for coming, everybody. Come by the booth. It's, what's our booth, 9:30? You got a chance to win a drone, so we have a very quick 5-minute in-booth activity, and we gave away one yesterday. We're still going to give one away today, so come by the booth, play the challenge, and thanks for coming out.